In today's video, you will learn exactly how to lease a car like a pro. In fact, everything that I'm sharing with you, I have done myself. This has helped me get a $37,000 car down to $29,000, which is 20% off, and my monthly payments came out to be $303, which is less than 1% of the MSRP. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to do the same and get the best lease. What's up, winners? My name is Nam. If you're new here, welcome. Here we talk all things personal finance. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future videos. I know I made a similar video like this in the past, but I wanted to do an updated version. I had some comments in the previous video about my verbiage and not using the terms correctly, but the thing is, I was trying to explain it in layman's terms, so common folk like myself can better understand this. Just because I said sales price instead of gross capitalized costs, does it really matter? The core concepts of getting a great deal on a lease is fairly simple. So before I start, I have to mention who is this video exactly for. This is not for people who's trying to find the cheapest way to drive a car. I know that I'm still gonna get people in the comments saying that leasing a car is the stupidest decision. Why not buy a used car and just drive it? Why would you wreck yourself in debt? Bro, I know, this video is not made for you. This video is made for people who want to get the best deal on a car lease. That may sound like an oxymoron, but it is possible. In the end, this is your money. You do whatever the hell you want with it. I fully know that leasing a car is not the cheapest way of driving, but I still lease a car every now and then because I want to. So you do you. This is gonna be a very in-depth tutorial and explanation. Timestamps are below for future reference. So first off, let's go over exactly what is a lease. So in a nutshell, a car lease is basically renting a car. Once your terms are up, you don't own it, but you do have an option to buy it at an agreed price if you would like. You're essentially paying for what you use. Whenever you buy a car and finance it, you just make monthly loan payments until you pay it off until the car is finally yours. The thing about leases is that they're very negotiable, just like any other car purchase. So don't ever get caught up on lease specials on dealers' websites, because this is just bait to get you inside of the dealership. How car dealerships make money is by negotiating the price that you agreed upon, then selling that note to a finance company who handles the financing. So you are not directly having financing with the dealership because a financial company has already paid the dealership for your leasing agreement. The majority of car brands, they have their own financing. Meaning that if you were going to get a lease with BMW, they have BMW Financial. Same thing with Toyota or Lexus, is Toyota Financial. After you finish up your lease, which is typically around 2 to 4 years, you can return this to your nearest dealership and be freed of payments. So before I dive a little bit deeper onto leasing, let me go over some terminology so you know exactly what you guys are getting into before you lease. Since a car lease can be overly complicated, but I promise I'll try to break it down as simply as possible. Alright, so let's get into it. The first one that we will be talking about would be capitalized costs. This is just another term for sales price. This is the price that you negotiate plus any other additional cost that goes along with the lease. Essentially, the lower the cap cost, the lower your monthly payments will be. The next term is going to be capitalized cost reduction or adjustment. This is just another fancy term for things that bring down the final sales price of the car. Some examples will be cashback offers, military, recent college grad, or different rebates. Also, if you have a down payment or a trade-in, this will also count as a cap cost reduction. I never recommend doing a down payment, so depending on how your credit is, some financial companies will require something down. But again, if you're in the market for leasing a vehicle, your credit should already be excellent. So as for a trade-in, this is basically the same thing as a down payment. You just reduce your monthly payments. So again, this is something that I do not recommend. If you are upside down on a vehicle, I would not recommend rolling it on top of a lease. Just get rid of it or consider not leasing. The main reason why I don't like down payments is that essentially you're just making early payments. And there are risks when you're putting down a down payment when you're leasing a car. If your car is ever stolen or totaled, you can always walk away from a lease without a penalty, just due to the fact that most leases require gap insurance. But if you were to put down a down payment, you would never get that money back, so I would not recommend ever having one. Also, when you have a down payment, it's really hard to figure out whether or not you are getting a good deal, because any deal can look like $199 per month if you put enough money down or trade in the vehicle. Now let's talk about the lease terms. This is the number of months and miles that you agree to pay. The most common lease terms are 36 months, 36,000 miles. Mileage can be as low as 5,000 miles per year, all the way up to 18,000 miles per year, and possibly higher depending on how you negotiate. But if you are a person who drives a car quite a bit, it's probably better off just buying a vehicle than leasing it. In leases, they usually last between 2 to 4 years. Now let's talk about the residual value. The residual value is represented in a percentage of what the vehicle will be worth after the terms of the lease. The number is represented by the MSRP, not the final sales price or the capitalized cost. So let's just say a $40,000 car has a residual value of 50%, meaning at the end of the lease term, the car will be worth $20,000. Ideally, you want to lease vehicles that have high residual values, because this will make your monthly payments so much lower. Because a major component of car leasing is the sales price, which is the capitalized cost, minus the residual value. So with that $40,000 car, if you were able to negotiate down to $32,000, you would have to pay the difference between the residual value and $32,000. Now let's move on to the money factor. The money factor is just another fancy term for the interest rate. Usually the money factor is represented by multiple decimal points like 0.001. So to get the actual interest rate, all you would have to do is multiply that number by 2,400. So in this case, it will be 2.4%. So on a topic of money factors, this particular interest rate can actually be marked up. So it would behoove you to research this number beforehand. I'll show you how to do this exactly later in the video. But once you find out what the money factor is on a particular vehicle, there are ways to lower it. In my previous video, someone mentioned that it's not possible to actually lower it, but it actually is. The only way that you will be able to lower money factor is by placing multiple security deposits, something referred to as MSDs. So for instance, every $500 that you deposit, this will reduce the money factor by a slight bit. So depending on the financial company, you can place as many as 7 to 10 deposits. The more expensive the car is, the more valuable of lowering the money factor. But the thing is, only a handful of financial companies actually offer MSDs. The main difference with this type of security deposit from a down payment is that you get the money back at the end of your lease, even if your car is stolen or totaled. MSDs lowers your risk from a financial standpoint, so in case if you were to default on your payments. But again, it's really up to you if you want to park your money somewhere for 2 to 4 years rather than having it invested somewhere else. Now let's talk about some fees that are specific towards leases. The first one we will cover is the disposition fee. This is a fee that covers the expense of cleaning up and selling the car after you return it. Typically, if you do not decide to buy out the vehicle after the end of the lease, this is something that you would have to pay. There's really no other way around this aside from selling the vehicle to a third party instead of turning it back in, but more on this later, but typically this ranges anywhere from $300 to $400. Next, let's talk about excess mileage fees. This is a fee that many people worry about, because on lease agreements, there are set terms that you have to follow. If you agree to drive 36,000 miles over 3 years, for every mile that you go over this amount, you would have to pay for it. Depending on the vehicle, this can range anywhere from 20 to 50 cents per mile. Again, the only way around this is to purchase the vehicle at the end of your lease term, sell the vehicle to a third party, or just lease another vehicle with them. Sometimes if you were to lease another vehicle from the same manufacturer, they'll waive the excess mileage fees so they can continue to have you as a customer. And lastly, one of the fees that you should be aware of is excessive wear and tear. This is a fee where they would charge you after you turn in the vehicle. If your vehicle has torn leather, lots of scratches, or even worn down tires, they can actually charge you for this. Normally before turning in the lease, there's a whole process of getting your vehicle checked out so you know what to fix prior to turning it in. Alright, so by now you guys know all the fancy terminology that goes into a car lease. Now let's actually go through the actual process of getting the best possible price on that lease. First, let's go over the 1% rule or test. This is a basic rule of thumb that you should consider to figure out whether or not a lease is a good deal. As a disclaimer, this is not set in stone and it's just an overall generalization. You couldn't believe how many hate comments I got about this, how this rule does not exist and you should not even follow this. Some people just take things way too seriously, but this is something to quickly calculate when running your numbers. With the 1% rule, this relates to your monthly payments and the MSRP of a vehicle. Again, the 1% rule does not apply to the interest rate, but only the monthly payments. It is not uncommon to see some vehicles that have monthly payments of 0.5% of the MSRP. You kind of see this more with American cars like GM. So let's just say that a vehicle has an MSRP of $40,000. 1% of $40,000 is $400. This is the market price that you should try to aim for. I'm not saying that you will get this price because there are some vehicles out there that there's no way that you can even come close to the 1% of the MSRP. So just take this with a grain of salt. Also with the 1% rule, there will be some variations to this. What I consider a great deal is a vehicle that can pass the 1% test with zero drive-out fees, meaning that there's no money down, the acquisition fees, document fees, DMV fees, and also the taxes are rolled into the lease. Once all of those things are rolled into the lease, if your monthly payment is still under 1%, then I consider that's a pretty good deal. Because if you were to lease a vehicle for 2 years with 75,000 miles per year, it's gonna be less of a good deal compared to someone who's leasing a vehicle for 3 years with 15,000 miles. So with my previous car lease, the MSRP was around $37,000. I had a monthly payment of $303 that included everything. Usually when I negotiate car leases, I like to go for the out-the-door price so I know exactly what I'll be paying with no surprises. Now let's move on to something that I overlooked in my last video, which is your credit score. When I'm talking about credit score, I'm not talking about what is shown in your Credit Karma app or what it says on your credit card homepage. This is not the correct credit score that financial companies will look at. Whenever you are looking to get auto financing, especially when it comes to a lease, they will most likely look at your FICO auto score. The reason why I say probably because depending on the financial company, they may look at different credit scores from different credit bureaus. This credit score will mainly pertain to people who have installment loans or any other previous auto loans in the past. If you had a repo within the last 7 years, it's going to be almost impossible for you to get a good rate unless you're somehow able to remove it from your credit report. So it is generally a good idea to ask which credit scoring model that they use so you can have a better idea of where you sit to get better rates. When getting a lease, each financial company will have their own credit tiers. They will put you in a tier depending on your credit score. Generally, tier 1 credit will range from 720 and above, but some financial companies will require you to have a credit score of 740 and above to qualify for tier 1 credit. Even if you don't qualify for tier 1, it's not the end all of getting a good deal. Depending on the financial company, sometimes individuals who are tier 1 and tier 2, they'll qualify for the exact same rate. If you are an individual with less than good credit ranking in the 600s, leasing a car is going to be super expensive than it already is, and you may want to consider a cosigner. Another option that you can attempt to try if you have less than perfect credit is a request for a tier boost. If the financial manager really wants your business, they can bump you up to a higher tier to get slightly better rates. But if you have less than excellent credit, it's really up to you if you want to continue watching this video, because no matter what I tell you, your interest rate is going to end up making your lease more costly. Now let's move on to the most important part before any car purchase, which is the research. I have to say this in every single video because this is definitely the most important part. Let's be honest, one of the best things about leasing a car is that you can drive cars much cheaper than you can really afford. But the thing is that depending on the make and model, there can be big differences. Generally, from what I've seen in my research and helping others out, you're definitely gonna find the best deal when you're leasing base models. I mean like just the bare bones. The car has no navigation, no fancy tech package, no updated wheels, just a basic car. Yes, I know this is probably not what you want to hear, but if you want the best price, this is what it is. Let me dive a little bit deeper on this so you guys can have a better understanding. Some people rationalize getting a car lease by getting a car that they would not generally own but want the highest availability of options. This is definitely a route that you can take, but since you are going to be driving this car only for a couple of years, but just be aware that you won't be getting the most bang for your buck when you're leasing. For instance, let's just say that you want to get an Acura RDX. The base model is around $38,000 and it has a residual value of 55%. But instead of the base model, you want the Acura RDX A-Spec, which has an MSRP of around $44,000, but the residual is 56%. As you guys can see, even though these are the same cars, but they have different packages, the residual values may differ a bit. This will apply for all cars out there. Sometimes the residual values may be exactly the same, but most likely they will be different. Again, these numbers are just for example. I'm not even sure if these are the exact residual values of these cars, but the concept will still apply. 55% of $38,000 would equal to $17,100 after 3 years. But if you were to go for the A-Spec, this car would be worth $19,360. The core concepts of leasing a car is that you pay for the amount between the sales price or the cap cost and the residual value. The closer you can get these numbers together, the better the deal will be. With example A, if you were to lease the base model, you're only going to be paying for $20,900 of depreciation. If you were going to go for example B, which is the A-Spec, you'll be paying roughly around $24,640 of depreciation. Remember, this is just a simple example. The amount of money that you would have to pay would be a lot less depending on how well you negotiate the cap costs. As you guys can see, it is going to be much easier to get the price of the base model closer to its residual value than it will be with higher models. The gap is so much wider. So just keep this in mind for the next car that you're looking to lease. Here's another insider tip. Timing on how and when you get your lease definitely matters. I would say the best times are in the summer, late of the year, and towards the end of the month or day. I generally see the best leases on models that are getting a facelift for the following year. And there are plenty of models each year that get a total body makeover. So for instance, the 2021 Acura TLX, Cadillac Escalade, and Chevy Tahoe. If you find a dealer that still has the 2020 models, this is where you get a steal. These cars have been on the lot for too long and they're just another year older. People wanting new cars, they usually want the latest and greatest. If there are no cars that you like that's getting a body makeover, another good option is to try to get loaner cars. I tend to see very good deals with BMW or Mercedes-Benz service loaners. Since these cars are slightly used anyways, you can generally get a pretty good deal with them. But aside from getting service loaners, I would not recommend leasing a used car. Now let's move on to the actual research process. Like everyone who sends me a message or a DM, I just tell them look what others are paying. This is gonna give you the best idea how much to pay for a specific car. The first thing that I like to generally do is go to the admin leasing forums. Once you make an account on that website, then you should ask what is the residual value, the money factor, and the terms that you're looking for alongside with your zip code. Shortly after that, a moderator should help you by showing you the numbers that's relative to your region. This is super important to know prior to your negotiation. Once you get these numbers from the admin forums, now let's head over to the Leasehackr forum. I had made a video mentioning this website before because this community is probably one of the best places that you can join or creep on to see the best ways to get a car lease. Honestly, I learned so much in this community than anywhere else. So this is definitely a place you want to check out prior to getting a lease. So once you head over to that forum, you want to look at the share deals and tips area. Don't be a noob by asking what deals you should get because no one's gonna do the actual legwork of researching for you. So this is something you have to do yourself. Then you'll see a big list of deals that people already signed or what people are getting. With this info, you kind of have a sense of what cars are selling right now and what deals can be made. The main reason why I got a great deal on my last car was by browsing these forums because another person got pretty much the same deal. And all I was trying to do was trying to find a dealership that would match it. If you have your mindset on a car that you want, but you're not really seeing any deals posted on this forum, then it's very likely that there are not that many deals out there for this particular make and model, or no one's really leasing this car. What I always tell everyone else is that it's best to replicate a deal that's already been made rather than starting something new. You don't have to reinvent the wheel if it's already been done recently. So whenever you do your research on this forum, most of the community members will list out their numbers. From the sales price, the cap cost, and any other incentives that it had, and everything else that helped them get the deal. Another way that you can research on this website is by browsing through the marketplace. This section of the website is where you can see dealerships and brokers listings. Typically, dealers and brokers who are listing on this portion of the forum, they know exactly who their audience is, so they tend to give you non-BS numbers up front. You definitely can attempt to renegotiate to get a lower monthly payment or price, but most of the time, they will give you the best price available. There are a bunch of dealerships and brokers across the country in this forum, so just click on a broker or dealer that's close to you so you get the most accurate pricing. So now you understand what others are getting, what brokers and dealers are offering, there is one last place I suggest you to go, which is downloading an app called Roto. I didn't mention them previously in a video I made before, but they changed their name from Honker to Roto. Just be aware that when you do sign up for this app, they do a soft inquiry on your credit. This by no means have any negative effects to your credit score. This is kind of similar to getting pre-approved offers that you get in the mail from credit cards. Only when you finalize the deal is when they do a hard credit check. Once you have the app, you can search for different makes and models, what deals they are offering, and you can see real numbers of what you will be paying. How Roto works is that they partner up with many dealerships across the country, and whatever is local to you, they have deals listed on there. Once you find a car that you like, you can adjust how much you want to pay down and your monthly payments. All the numbers that you see on this app will be out the door pricing. There's not going to be no bait and switch when you go to pick it up or when it's shipped to you. I personally used this app before, so I can tell you this is a legitimate app and the price you see is what you pay. If it says $400 a month, then it's $400 a month. But just as a reminder, just use this app as a place of research because you may find a great deal within the app, but sometimes you may find a better deal elsewhere. So I would just suggest wherever you find a great deal, just go there. I do have a referral link down in the description below if you guys decide to lease through them. You get 50 bucks, I get 50 bucks. It's kind of like a win-win. But aside from that, I'm not being sponsored by any of these websites that I mentioned in this video. It's just all of the tools that I've used in the past that helped me. Lastly, I know I keep saying lastly, but you should be looking for manufacturer specials. Some manufacturers do have incentives and rebates that can help you get a lower cap cost so you can have a lower monthly payment. If you haven't already, make sure you check them out before reaching out to dealerships. Alright, so now let's break down how to price a car lease. Like I mentioned before, whenever you try to lease a car, you're basically paying the difference between the sales price, which is the cap cost, and the residual value. A person by the name of Scott R posted a great summary for a lease under my previous video, so I'm just going to summarize it here so you guys know exactly what are the three parts of a car lease. The first part of a lease is the capitalized cost, which is the sales price of the car. By getting this number lower, the difference between the sales price and the residual value gets tighter, hence a lower monthly payment. Since having a lower sales price brings down your payment, the higher the residual value will do the same. This is something you have less control of, but while you're doing your research, you want to find cars with high residuals. Generally, the best residual values will be for 3 years with 10 or 12,000 miles a year. The last part of the lease will be the money factor. You will need to know this number. Most salesmen, they will not know what this is, but a financial manager, they will. Since you have done your research, you should know exactly what the money factor is based on Tier 1 credit. Because if you don't know this number, they can actually mark this up so they can make more money from you. Because with leases, you don't finance with the dealership. Dealerships are negotiating the price of the car with you, then that agreed price, which is the note, get passed on to the financial company and who then handles the terms of the lease. The dealerships then get paid by the financial company. They're the ones who look at your credit score and determine your money factor. But the thing with leases, the majority of the time whenever you're trying to get pricing, they will most likely show you the monthly payment. This can be very deceiving unless you know exactly what you want. Some people say focus on the car price first whenever you buy a car, but for leases, I'd rather focus on out the door monthly payments. The reason being is that you already done your research and know exactly how much you want to pay. You know the cap cost, incentives, and the money factor. If you were just to go off the generalized rule of the 1% rule, you can easily tell what the monthly payment should be. But again, please don't mention this to the internet sales manager because the people who are selling you the vehicle, they can really care less. Now with all that research that you have done, let's put this into action. Leasehackr has a pretty cool calculator where you can plug in all the numbers and expect how much you would have to pay on a monthly basis. Alright, so let me hop on my phone real quick so I can show you exactly what I'm doing. So on the Leasehackr Calculator, you can place in the make, and usually a lot of the stuff already populates already. Just plug in the MSRP of the vehicle. So in this example, it will be $40,000. The selling price is $32,000. And so this will equal to about 20% off of MSRP. So as you scroll down, you can plug in your lease numbers. So the months will be 36 months, which is 3 years. Miles per year will be 12,000. And also the residual is going to be 55%. So for this example, the money factor is going to be 0.001. So the APR will come out to be about 2.4%. Now let's go down to cap cost adjustment. This is going to be some tax incentives or untaxed incentives. This could be like military rebates or college grad rebates. So for this example, I'm not going to plug anything in here, but I'm pretty sure when you do get a lease, there's going to be some incentives that you will be eligible for. So I'm going to check the zero drive off just because that's usually how I prefer the lease. All right, so now moving down to the fees, taxes, and rebates. All this stuff is already pre-populated, so you may not have to change anything, but the only thing that I had to change was the dealer's fee. So in California, it's capped at $80. So depending on the state that you live in, just double check to make sure that number is correct. All right, so let's talk about sales tax for a second. So depending on where you live, tax is usually applied to the monthly payment. So I live in California, my sales tax is 9%. So every month I gotta pay a sales tax on the monthly payment, okay? So if you live in like New York, New Jersey, you have to pay the sales tax all up front. And some other states, such as Texas or Virginia, you gotta pay tax on the whole vehicle. That's kind of like one of the downsides if you live in one of those states, because like the actual perk of leasing a vehicle is that you only pay for the sales tax that you actually use. So another thing that you could plug in is the post-sale rebates, which are government clean vehicle rebates or BMW CCA rebates. So once we plug in all of our numbers, this is what we're gonna see. Our pre-tax monthly payment will be $372. Our monthly payment with tax is going to be $405, zero drive-off fees. The total cost of the lease is going to be $13,373. And our Leasehackr score is 9.5 years. So what a Leasehackr score is the amount of time that it will take for you to exceed the payments of the MSRP. So for this particular vehicle, it will take you 9.5 years of monthly payments to exceed the MSRP. Again, just take this number with a grain of salt, because even if you were to purchase a new vehicle, you will most likely not be purchasing it at retail. But the general idea is the higher number in years, the better off your deal is. So in this example, this is a 1% lease, just slightly over, but the thing is that there's zero drive-off fees and taxes are also included. 405 is a pretty good number for a vehicle that's close to $40,000. Again, remember just to take this with a grain of salt, because this is just an example. You can possibly pay more or less. Now you guys know how leasing works, how to run your numbers. Now let's go over how to negotiate a car lease. This is everyone's favorite part. Or not. To be honest, if you don't negotiate on a regular basis, it's going to be very easy to get overwhelmed or sucked into their tactics. With all the research you have done and you kind of have a brief idea of how much you should pay for the lease, just stick to your numbers and plan. As a reminder of what you estimated and ran your numbers for, this is usually for people who have excellent credit. If you have anything less than that, the interest rate will usually make that deal not so good. After you look on forums like Leasehackr or check prices on Roto, this is the price point that you should try to negotiate down from. Depending on where you live, if you live in a big city or small town, it's time to start reaching out to nearby dealerships. I would email blast a bunch of them so they had to fight for my business. Remember, if you were to do this, just make sure that you are ready to lease a car as soon as possible, probably within the same day or week, because not only this will save you time, but give the salesman a deadline and a sense of urgency. Because the truth of the reality is, car salesmen, they get a lot of people asking quotes all day long and they do nothing about it. So save yourself some time and the car salesman time and message the people whenever you are serious. We're here not trying to waste each other's time. Now I will contact each dealership with a simple email. This is definitely the preferred way of contact prior to stepping foot on a dealer's lot. Before you contact them, just make sure they have the vehicle in stock and you have the stock number ready so you can refer this in your email. Most dealerships, they'll have an internet sales manager available, so it's easy to go onto their website and just shoot them an email. These are the guys that are sitting by the computer all day long, so they respond to you relatively fast. This is typically how my email goes. I will say, hello, my name is Nam. I'm in the market for this specific car. I'm looking to lease for 36 months with 12,000 miles per year. My credit score is 750 and I'm looking to lease with zero drive off. I'm ready to sign the paperwork today if I'm able to find a seller with the best price. That is simple and straight to the point. Once you receive some emails back from your local dealerships, this will give you a generalization of what the market price is for that particular vehicle. Your follow-up email can include more specifics about the car, like the cap costs, money factor, and what was the invoice for the price of the car. Some car salesmen will share you the invoice price, but some will not. The ones that will be more honest with you, and they will tend to get you a better price with them because there's really no beating around the bush. The ones that won't provide it to you, you just gotta work a little bit harder. Most local dealerships will have similar invoice prices. There may be some slight differences, but usually not by much. A secret thing that you should know is that some manufacturers, but not all, they have this thing called a dealer holdback. This is a percentage amount that's paid to the dealership from the manufacturers once a vehicle is sold. This usually helps dealerships cover their running costs and commissions. So whenever they're saying that they're losing money on a deal, this is far from the truth, and most likely they're making money no matter what. Some manufacturers like Toyota or Mercedes will give dealerships a holdback price of around 1 to 3% of the MSRP of a vehicle. So if a car costs $30,000 and has a 2% holdback, the dealership will get $600 no matter what. So the best place to start is at the invoice price minus the dealer holdback, if the manufacturer does offer it. Most dealerships will not give up their holdback for you, but it is a good place to start as an anchor, then negotiate from there. As long as one dealership does give you the invoice price, you should have kind of like a brief idea of what others are buying them for as well. If the salesman returns saying that you need to come in or get on the phone, avoid this as much as possible. Just deflect it and continue your negotiation. If they need to run your credit before giving you the numbers, this is just another tactic and is far from the truth. They can still give you an estimate of what your monthly payment would be if you were to have excellent credit. If you know for sure that you have excellent credit, then there's no reason to get unnecessary hard increase until you find a dealer to finally work with. So after a few offers, it's time to either get on the phone or head to the dealership. But most of your negotiations should have been done already. You should always get the out the door pricing, so once you're there, all you have to do is have them check your credit, verify to say who you say you are, and just sign the paperwork and leave. Towards the end of the negotiation, there may be some upsells and some add-ons to the lease. The majority of these will be useless, so just refuse them. One thing that you may want to consider is excessive wear and tear insurance. I have found that many people have found this to be worth it, but just double check on the contract of what the financial company will consider normal wear and tear. But if you are planning to sell the lease before the terms is up, then you may not want to get it. But now let's just say that you want to get into leasing, but you're not ready to do a full 2 or 4 year lease. One option you can take is lease swapping. This is basically when you just take over someone else's lease. Generally, to take over someone's lease, you would have to have the same credit as the person who originally had the lease before you. A good website to do lease swaps on is leasehackr.com. They have a specific section on that, and also another website called Swap a Lease. I know there's some other ones as well, but these ones are the most popular. Essentially, you can find some leases that are under the mileage, and even sellers may give you a cash rebate to take over the lease. But again, you have to do your own due diligence, just due to the fact that when people are giving up their lease, they may not be in good financial standing, or the deal itself is not good from the beginning. You would also have to make sure if the lease has multiple security deposits. These were the security deposits that I mentioned earlier that would bring down the money factor. If the lease has this, the seller would most likely want to have this money back from you as a buyer before you can proceed with the swap. Generally, if there's any damage from the previous seller, it is now your responsibility since you are taking over the terms of the lease. So it is best to try to meet up with someone who's local so you can inspect the vehicle before signing the documents. If you guys want to learn more about lease swapping, I did make a video on this particular topic, so I'll post a link down in the description below and also up here. So now let's move on to what happens towards the end of your lease. I know this video is more for starting to get into a lease, but you should always have a general idea of what happens towards the end of it. As you know by now, after your terms is up, all you have to do is turn it back in. You would usually be notified by the financial company a couple months out so you can better prepare. Typically, you would have an inspection where someone would take a look at your vehicle and see the things that you need to fix before you would have to turn it back in. Each vehicle will have a buyout price. This is something that will be on the leasing contract, meaning that you would have the option to buy this vehicle once your lease is up. If not, then you would have to pay the disposition fee. This is the fee that you would have to pay the dealership that's taking the vehicle in so they could clean it up and make it brand new again so they could put it back on the lot. You can avoid this fee if you were to lease another car with them, but just make sure that you can. One suggestion that I always recommend prior to turning into your lease, starting about 6 months or so, is that I would recommend looking for third parties to sell your lease. Places where they will give you great offers for your vehicle would be Carvana or Vroom. So all you gotta do is take pictures of the vehicle, give a brief description, and just plug in all that information pertaining to your car, and then they will just give you a quote. These companies will also pick up the vehicles themselves, so you wouldn't have to drop them off. Of course, if you were gonna sell your lease, just make sure that whatever they're offering is higher than the buyout price and the remaining payments on your lease. This is one way where you can have some equity in a lease vehicle. So if your car's buyout price is $24,000, but Carvana is offering you $26,000, then that difference between the two will be money in your pocket. So in reality, the overall price of your lease can be much less. Just remember that negotiating leases can be a little bit technical and tricky, especially if you don't know all the verbiage that goes into a lease. So the best thing that you can do is try to know the residual value, the money factor, and try to get the capitalized cost or the sales price of the vehicle as low as humanly possible. Even after this video, if this sounds way too difficult or complex, try to hit up a car broker. This may cost you a couple $100s, but you may save more money rather than doing it yourself. If you guys got some value from this video, make sure you give this video a like. I'll see you guys in my next one.